The Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government is hosting a hearing right now on the Twitter files. Let's watch some of that.
And to praise him for his work. This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter. We know for a fact that foreign countries like Qatar and to
So that was those so-called journalists are Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, who've both been guests on our show and have done great work to bring the Twitter files to you. Here's how Taibbi responded to being called a so-called journalist.
That time was spent at Rolling Stone magazine. Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. I'm now that time was spent at Rolling.
I love that. A real mic drop moment there. I hope she was listening, because it seemed like from that clip that she wasn't even really paying attention to him.
They're never paying attention.
But look, the attacks
I testified
on Matt
before
Taibbi.
Congress before they say their thing and then they say.
Yeah. Well, look, you are allowed, obviously, to disagree with Matt Taibbi on various things. You're allowed to say that this aspect of the reporting was more valuable than this aspect, to disagree with some of the conclusions that he might have drawn from some of the reporting. But to deny the substance of what he has reported on in its entirety, at the same time that you completely devolve into ad hominem personal attacks, which are so easily refuted, as Matt Taibbi did there. Of all the things to criticize the man for, the idea that he is somehow not a real journalist or doesn't have a body of work that stands on its own 2 legs, is absurd.
We've not been able to tune into the full hearing because we've been sitting in these chairs making this show, but so I'm seeing on social media, I'm seeing various clips, and this is a hearing about what the Twitter files has shown, which is this very worrying collaboration between government-funded NGOs and government agencies like the FBI and others to influence Twitter and other social media companies to take down so-called misinformation having to do with Hunter Biden, elections, COVID, maybe some of those requests being legitimate, a lot of them being take down this account that a political figure wanting an account taken down that was mean to them, and it's totally cross-partisan, Democrats, Republicans doing it, but the FBI and the agencies pushing on stuff from a very Russiagate perspective is, I think, what was most concerning, and what I've seen from the Twitter files so far, these government-funded entities and government agencies saying, take down all these accounts because they're Russian bots, Twitter having internal discussions saying, these aren't actually Russian bots, and then the pressure campaign saying, you got to do something or we're going to tell Politico or the New York Times that you don't take the threat of Russian misinformation seriously. Yeah, that's what is worrying and is worth Congress knowing about. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of these Democratic congressmen couldn't care less about this.
Yeah, well, it's worth noting, and you've pointed this out, that Yoel Roth and others often refused those requests.
Yes.
And while there have been some really big mistakes, the Hunter Biden laptop story being suppressed, chief among them, accompanied by internal discussions about how this doesn't even really violate our guidelines. I think that's one of the most damning pieces. In addition to the Li Fang reporting about the kind of deep state-run, intelligence agency-run bot accounts that are pantomiming basically accordance with various international policy regimes.
The U.S. is doing exactly what our FBI is saying
that Russia's doing. Right. Okay. So that I think is one of the areas where Matt Taibbi is on such really solid ground. But it is also true, of course, that many times Twitter pushed back against this, and the issue really is almost more of a criticism of the intelligence agencies for trying to curry this influence more than Twitter itself for at times acquiescing to it.
Well, right, and Twitter's a private company. Like if it was as simple as Twitter's just making decisions we don't like, I would in fact reject that there's a basis to have a government committee meeting about it. Like, sorry, it's not your company.
Sure.
But what we've learned is that they're getting pressure from government-funded agencies to do some very sketchy things.
Yes.
And I want to play a couple more clips here. So here was Michael Schellenberger and Taibbi reacting to a question put to them about whether the hacked and released materials were misinformation.
Mr. Schellenberger, do you believe that the Russians engaged in a hack and release campaign with respect to the damaging information they released regarding the Clinton campaign?
To the best of my awareness, that is what happened.
Okay, yes. Fair enough. Thank you.
That's not the same thing.
The reason
influencing.
I understand.
Also, that material was true.
Look, Let me introduce a couple of documents just to reinforce that we've got.
That is not a legitimate predicate for censorship.
Mr. Schellenbeck, do you believe?
Yeah, again, he's just slamming the door shut there. Like, it's real information. It's not misinformation. It's true.
That's such an important point because so many of Taibbi's critics have been not taking that into account as well. I interviewed Matt Taibbi on my own show on Monday, and I have some concerns about the broader representations, not what he actually has in his hands and he's reporting on, which I think is true and newsworthy, but some of the broader conclusions that have been drawn about the nature of the bias, that the bias is only against the right and not at all against the left, when he, admitted to me in the course of that interview that he hasn't really investigated at all targeting against the left, because he very quickly came across the deep state, the intelligence agency's interests in influencing the censorship regime at these organizations, and decided to pursue that, which I think is a very legitimate course of action. But broader claims about whether or not, what the rest of the files show, I don't think you can really substantiate. However, having those kind of criticisms, what else is there? Is the broader framing accurate? Is not the same thing as challenging the newsworthiness of the emails that he has in his possession, which obviously show this relationship between intelligence agencies and Twitter and their ability to influence what Twitter does from a policy perspective that are undeniably inappropriate.
And there's some just crazy questioning of his motivations going on in this hearing. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz saying that he's just in it for the money or something. Here, let's actually play that clip. It's pretty illustrative.
Please do not interrupt me. Elon Musk spoon-fed you his cherry-picked information, which you must have suspected promotes a slanted viewpoint, or at the very least generates another right-wing conspiracy theory. You violated your own standard, and you appear to have benefited from it. Before the release of the emails in August of last year, you had 661,000 Twitter followers. After the Twitter files, your followers doubled, and now it's 3 times what it was last August. I imagine your Substack readership, which is a subscription, increased significantly because of the work that you did for Elon Musk. Now, I'm not asking you to put a dollar figure on it, but it's quite obvious that you've profited from the Twitter files. You hit the jackpot on that Vegas slot machine to which you referred. That's true, isn't it?
I've also reinvested.
You've made some. No. Is it true that you have profited since you were the recipient of the Twitter files? You've made money. Yes or no?
I think it's probably a wash, honestly.
Nope. You have made money that you did not have before, correct?
But I've also spent money that I didn't have before. I just hired a whole group of people to invest.
Patently obvious answer, reclaiming my time. Attention is a powerful drug. Eyeballs, money, prominence, attention, all of it points to problems with accuracy and credibility. And the larger point, which is social media companies are not biased against conservatives, and if anything, they ignored their own policies by allowing Trump and other MAGA extremists to post incessant lies, endangering public safety and even our democracy. Hypocrisy is the hangover of an addiction to attention.
Outrageous. Outrageous. I'm sorry, you're journalism who wants people to read your reporting, and it's considered to be undermining your credibility if you're popular, if people respond to the things that you're writing.
It's not charity. It's a job.
He's paid for his work and the hard work and the incredible toll that he's taken as being targeted as a consequence of all of this reporting. It's outrageous, and you know that she would never have this criticism of a journalist for an establishment paper, the New York Times. She would never make a criticism of Hillary Clinton for selling books as a consequence of her.
People are doing speeches and selling books.
Exactly.
That's right. Good journalism should attract, hopefully, financial reward.
Exactly. And I gotta say, this kind of moralizing from someone who had to step down his DNC chair because a leak of true information revealed her bias for Hillary Clinton and participating in trying to, rig the election for the 2016 primary election for her preferred candidate. It's a little bit rich. It's a little bit rich. I will say, however, it pains me to do this, but this is exactly the issue that I was trying to convey to Matt Taibbi when I talked to him most recently on my show, it seemed to me he created a vulnerability and not just reporting on what was in front of him, but making these broader claims about the directionality of the bias, even if they're true. I think it's frankly, especially in the immediate time frame we're talking about now, frankly, very true that the social media companies have a bias more against conservatives than the right, than the left, and certainly against liberals, because they're all liberals at these institutions. But what we're really seeing is an establishment bias against an anti-establishment bias. So the bias is against Trumpism and those kinds of figures, election denialism, that part of the right, not Mitt Romney. And at other times when the left has been more of a threat to power during the Bernie campaigns or many more years ago in American history, then the FBI's focus, the CIA's focus, has disproportionately been attacking those kinds of groups. So I do think a framing that acknowledges that would make Matt Taibbi less vulnerable to what clearly has triggered the liberals here, which is that you are claiming that the right is victims, and I just can't, I'm going to ignore all the information in the world if it leads me to the conclusion that the right is in fact being targeted. Frankly, in this context.
Sure, I agree and appreciate that. I don't think anything he could have done would have deflected the kind of attacks he's getting from Plaskett and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others here, because they are just so bought into the idea that social media let pro-Trump voices speak too loudly, and that is the reason he became president. That was illegitimate and wrong. That was a corruption of democracy. It was Russia's fault. Facebook, and to a lesser extent Twitter, it was their job to prevent it. They didn't. That's their mindset. That's their entire narrative, and it's completely wrong. Frankly, it's just completely wrong from start to finish. Time and time again, social scientists, people who've studied, have proven that the influence of Russian bots is minuscule, that it was not correctly calibrated to target the right swing voters. And again, they weren't being targeted necessarily with what is misinformation. It's just alternative perspective. Like you always bring up the examples of black voters being targeted and saying the Democratic Party doesn't do enough for them. That's misinformation. Come on.
Right.
So it's the whole idea is wrong. And Taibbi and Schellenberger and others are bringing attention to how that narrative came about, and actually efforts that government authorities are making to try to correct what was not a mistake in the first place. As a result, we'll all be censored.
What we are seeing here is a bunch of government actors protecting government institutions.
Yes.
It really, and this is when I say that I am less enthusiastic or I'm cautious about the conversation about the valence of this, it's because I don't want this point to be missed. It's not that I care if the right is being targeted more than the left. I think that they are. But I don't want to miss the conversation that what we're seeing is there could be, the parties could change. The chessboard can reconfigure the next time around. But the establishment actors in Congress are always going to defend the FBI, the CIA, these intelligence agencies that do their bidding, that are now being accused of potentially blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, that have been defending American imperialism and state power and the infringements of the rights of minorities and individual citizens since they were founded. And it's important to keep that in mind, because the next time around, the D's and the R's might be switched around, but you're always going to have a panel of Congress people who are willing to sit there and say, there's nothing to see here when the intelligence agencies that we have access to and control over are infringing upon your rights as citizens.
And the agencies, they are ideological but not partisan. So much of this happened under Republican administrations. If Donald Trump's going to run, he's running for president, he's going to say, I will put an end to this. Don't believe him. So much of it happened under his authority.
Well, he was making requests too.
He made no effort to stop it or slow it. He didn't care. He didn't understand it. And that should be actually reason enough not to trust him to rein this in whatsoever.
He very much was making requests too, as Matt Taibbi has reported.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. Please stay with us.